Hi, everyone. We're live. Welcome to our discussion this evening that is called Fat Pig Next Generation. I'm Miriam Gordon-Stewart. My guest tonight will be esteemed American playwright Neil LaBute. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I've met Neil once before. And before we bring him into the studio, I'm just going to tell you a few things about him. So, Detroit-born playwright Neil LaBute grew up in Spokane, Washington. He studied theater at Brigham Young University, where he began producing his own plays. Neil shot to fame with the 1997 release of his first feature film, In the Company of Men, which was adapted from his own play of the same name. The play had debuted at Brigham Young and had won an award from the Association for Mormon Letters. Filming for the project took 2 weeks and cost $25,000. And this is where Neil's career and Victory Hall Opera's aesthetic find their meeting place. That sounds like our kind of project, one that takes 2 weeks and costs $25,000. His long list of plays includes Reasons to be Pretty, The Shape of Things, The Distance from Here, and most recently, True Love Will Find You, and The Answer to Everything. His TV credits include Van Helsing, Island, and several episodes of Billions. He's been called a misanthrope and a misogynist, and he's quoted as saying, "It's part of my makeup to ruin a perfectly good day for people." He's also described by others as the sweetest guy you'll ever meet and the guy who always picks up the check. And I can vouch for that. He did indeed pick up the check. I've known him as a very prompt correspondent and an extremely respectful and generous colleague. And I would like to introduce you to you, if we have him, Mr. Neil LaBute.
Hey
Hi, Neil, and welcome.
Good, thank you.
We had a few last-minute technical difficulties, and we made
No worries. Yeah, technology, terrible and beautiful.
So Neil's Skyping in or StreamYarding in from New York City this evening. He had intended to come along to Charlottesville and visit us for our upcoming premiere of Fat Pig the Opera. But as we all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it seemed like a very, very bad idea. So we're just really thankful that you instead allowed us the opportunity to speak to you online today.
Of course, yeah, it would have been nice, but yeah, it's a tough time to travel.
Yeah, it sure is. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, Neil, in your childhood, but
okay,
I am interested in
better you than me. So
I am interested in Neil LaBute, the child in the playground.
Yeah.
I can imagine you like enacting cruel scenarios with the toys in the sand pit. I mean, does that sound accurate to you?
It doesn't now that if you put me to the wall and make me think about it, it's no, I grew up kind of, in the woods and on a farm, sort of. I mean, we ended up working on a farm. Our family did. We didn't own it, but we worked on it, and so it was very rural. Kind of like by a lake, and so there wasn't a lot of time for concocting horrible scenarios. Although I spent a lot of time sitting on a tractor. So, that idle hands and all that stuff. There might have been, time heading across the field where a few of those terrible scenarios have come from.
Right. So were you quite isolated? Were there other kids around where you were?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a kind of neighborhood and kids, and definitely had, friends and enjoyed school and sort of loved everything that got me out of the house. Whatever took me, away, and so theater or sports or anything like that was great. Going off on camping trips, definitely, very, very rural, blue collar, but full childhood experience, I think.
Right. Do you remember when you started writing, and maybe what the first story was that you wrote?
No, not the first story, but I remember writing it early. I remember prose, more than anything. Making little books, I mean, literally crafting little books and then, filling in the pages and all that. So early on, and loved to read. Public library was definitely a lifesaver. Um, and so I think most writers that I've met have been readers, and kind of I followed that same path of anything I could get my hands on, from the back of a cereal box to the newspaper to and then also watching television and movies, all those things. Theater was probably the most removed from my life at that point, because we didn't have access to it in the same way. Say if I'd grown up in New York or that kind of thing, I was looking at more of a church might put on a play, school might put on a play. There was a community theater in Spokane. So pretty limited in terms of but the times that I did go, I loved that experience. So it was
Right.
it was definitely something that I immediately took to, but didn't get a lot of when I was a kid.
Yeah. So when you did start writing, was there a sense straight away that you were good at it? Were you sort of getting feedback from your teachers or from people who were reading your early works?
Yeah.
It was something special, or?
I don't know about special, but I had certainly a tenacity. I enjoyed it. I did it. I kept putting it out there. Even in drama class, I was more interested in writing the monologues rather than performing them. So I could feel my attention turn toward writing and directing rather than acting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you have acted though, right, in a number of your films, and
Well, not in films really, or and then only in a very limited way when I was younger, because it was the only kind of thing that was available, to me in like high school or in college. You'd kind of like you'd help somebody, you'd be in their thing, and then they would be in yours, and that way you would end up with a cast. Also, you can count on yourself usually, to show up, and so that was the reason I would cast myself more than because I was good.
yeah, yeah. Later as well, you're very inexpensive, which is nice.
Exactly. So cheap and willing to show up. So that's high marks for me.
Yeah.
But
Again,
yeah, acting, I love watching actors, but yeah, I've never had the same bug for acting that I have for everything else.
Right. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. For those of you who are just joining us in the broadcast, my name is Miriam Gordon-Stewart. I'm the artistic director of Victory Hall Opera. I'm the librettist and director of the upcoming world premiere of Fat Pig, the opera, which is adapted from the play by Neil LaBute, who I'm speaking to this evening. So you studied theater at Brigham Young, at Brigham Young University. What made you choose Brigham Young?
I wasn't a Mormon at that point, and I got a scholarship there, and it was kind of the best of the bunch that of the schools that I had applied to. It also was away from home, which was a draw, far enough away that the folks weren't going to drop in every weekend, or I wouldn't be tempted to come home. So that was a plus. They had good facilities. I'd been around a bunch of Mormons who I thought actually had some talent, in high school, in the theater world. So all those things seemed like good fresh start, and I like a challenge. I like kind of the challenge in this case, the challenge of going somewhere and starting over, not knowing anybody, or just going and seeing where life took me. So that certainly, I think, more than filled the bucket of why I needed to go somewhere, and that's where I went.
The challenges continued, I guess, because your trademark challenging content and style of writing was evident pretty much from the start, and from what I can sort of glean, and which is at times a bit of a dilemma for the very conservative university, and I've read accounts in which plays opened and were very quickly shut down after the
Yeah.
premiere because of the content. So
Things haven't changed much.
this
Uh,
is quite a challenge you set up
I mean,
artistically as well,
the
right?
times that we live in are very much the same. If somebody doesn't like something, they decide that everyone's not going to like it, so they'll go about trying to bring it to a close. So it's in however many years, life is remarkably similar. So it's been kind of the same but different for 30 or 40 years.
It started as it continued to go on, but I mean, you didn't take it personally, I guess, because you did convert to Mormonism. Well,
I did,
Mormonism.
yeah.
I'm not supposed to call it that anymore, but for the sake of
Yeah, I mean, the word,
your
everybody still knows the word. Yeah. It's yeah, I did definitely at the time. I think I was definitely surrounded by what I thought were good people, and it wasn't so much that I was drawn to the religion as the culture itself, and so I that became a part of my life, and it was a part of my life for a while until I realized I couldn't do the kind of work I wanted to do and still be what would be considered a good Mormon, you know. Um,
Yeah.
that's always comes down to, like, are you good or bad or practicing, or you know I always felt like I needed more practice. I was never I was never good enough at it, and I guess devout or interested enough in the end, that I felt like more like I needed to go on this path of writing than I did on that path of religion, and so writing sort of became the religion for me instead.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean about the culture. I grew up in a Baptist church in Australia, and have very, very fond memories of the culture of that, of the friendships and the sort of the get-togethers and the just being able to kind of talk about meaningful
Right.
things, which kids who didn't grow up in church, I don't think they really get to do. I mean, I kind of miss talking about God, right? And
Right.
not necessarily worshiping or doing any of the rest of it, but
Yeah, no. Just from
really
the same way you would talk about anything, just examine it and not get into these fraught, religious or scientific, that it didn't always have to be a pitched battle. In the same way that someone isn't always trying to, I guess, convert you to, or like politics can get that way. People talk about, let's don't talk about religion or politics, or even with a movie. It's great to talk about a movie or a play and realize that people can have two different opinions and they can both be valid, and we walk away and there's no harm done, as opposed to, I need to sway you to be on my side. Frank, I don't care what you think of whatever movie. If I like it, I'm going to like it. And I think we waste a lot of time trying to get people to buy into our own feelings or opinions, or just, we live under this idea that our opinions matter so much that it's like, again, like if I'm offended by something, that not only am I going to be offended, or I don't want to see that again, or maybe I won't read that person or see their stuff again, but I'm going to, I want to stop them from doing what they do. That's a huge thing to take on, in your, and to think that your opinion has that kind of weight. But it's we live in a time where people have access to machines that allow their voice to be heard in that way, and everything's kind of a double-edged sword. It's good and bad.
right. Yeah, and actually, I heard an article the other day on NPR that was talking about the fact that people are least likely to be swayed by people who are the most vehement about something, and
Yeah.
and most likely to be swayed by people who are pretty much like them. And
Yeah, no, yeah. Once it reaches a certain level, I turn the volume down pretty quickly.
Right,
That I'm
right.
just hearing the Charlie Brown voices, or nothing at all, just the mouths moving.
Yeah,
But,
it's
yeah,
true. Yeah,
personal space gets broken, and you shut down a little bit.
yeah. You also formed a friendship at Brigham Young with the actor Aaron Eckhart,
Yes.
who's also a Mormon.
There
Right?
he is, handsome devil.
Yeah. Is he still?
Is he still a handsome devil, or?
Well, he's still a handsome devil, of course, but is he still a Mormon, I guess?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Inquiring minds in this room want to know.
We don't talk about that really. I've never heard to the contrary that he isn't. But again, it was always, kind of like, we talked about it some, we didn't talk about it a lot. We tended to like talking about movies more, or theater, and, what we were doing, or just life in general. So, and I guess I'm not one to, men also can be, not to generalize as I'm about to generalize. But, we can be very happy in a kind of surface way, like you can have a friendship that stays at kind of the same level for dozens of years, and be like, oh, really? I didn't know you had a sister. But not be shocked or hurt that we didn't know that, or didn't care to know it, or be like, and then, then you can have two women who are in an airport lounge and learn more about each other in like 20 minutes than you've ever learned about your friend in, those 20 years. And I don't feel
it's so interesting that you say that, because when I was kind of doing the deep dive on you in the interwebs, I kept coming up with articles that which sort of trying to get the hidden story of the very, very elusive Neil LaBute. And people go from one man to another man asking about personal details about you, and one after the other they all kind of say, well, I don't know. And I sort of think, well, that's, of course, why are you asking guys?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Professional.
I was literally reading an article on David Strathairn like a half an hour before we got together, and it was talking about how uncomfortable he was. Like, he rarely does press, because I guess he's rarely asked to do it, because he's often like in a supporting role in something, and so it's somebody else that's doing the press. But he was being asked about stuff, and it was just, he was like so uncomfortable about. He was like, why does it matter? What was I like when I was a kid? What does that have to do with the movie that we just did? He was apparently so physically unhappy about doing that kind of interview. I think some people just are. They're just not naturally, that it wasn't part of their makeup or part of what they thought, they were signing on for. That it was like, I like to do the work, and I'm not interested in the red carpet. I'm not interested in the parties. I'm not interested in, you writing an article about me. I just want to, I live in those hours where, the thing is on stage and the lights are on, or I'm in a rehearsal room. That's what I care about. So I certainly, I got it. I understood his feelings about that.
Yeah, as an opera singer, which I also am, as well as being a librettist and a director, it's kind of my least favorite question when people ask me, like, what made you want to become an opera singer? Because it's like, it's
either you've heard it so many times, or
people want to know, right? They're asking.
I don't. It's not like I don't understand why they don't want to know, or why they want to know.
But I guess you never get around to talking about the good stuff, because you're always talking about your childhood. I totally get that. I'm with you.
But again, that's all subjective. It's from my point of view saying, I find the work more interesting, so therefore you should. But that's not necessarily true. You may not care about the work, and you want to know about a farm in Washington State. So you've come to the right place. If that's what you're dying to hear about, then I can tell you.
Right. But what kind of tractor was it? What
I can tell you. If you're dying to know, I'm here to tell you.
So there are definitely recurring themes in your work, and I'm just going to sort of move on to one that I find particularly interesting, which is this suspicion of male beauty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've read a couple of really good articles that sort of have looked into this with you. One of the articles that I read quoted Paul Rudd, a friend of yours, another collaborator as well, who said Neil is fascinated by the handsome frat boys because they have this simmering rage at life no longer being a golden romp for them. I can sort of see Paul Rudd saying that, which is great. And then in the same article, I think you said, pretty guys have this glow, no matter how bad they are. People keep coming back to them. Being pretty can bring out the worst in people. I always keep an eye on the pretty guy who can hurt me. Was there a formative time or experience? Here I go asking you about, your early life, but was there a time, or is that where did the suspicion, where did it come from?
I don't know exactly where that came from, and it certainly doesn't stop on the male side. If I think beauty as a whole, which I've looked at in, or physical attraction, non-attraction, just as a whole, I've looked at that a number of times in things, just because it's fascinating to me. Why when we're attracted to something, we're so willing um, to give it space, to give it room, to give it rope, to say, oh, I must have misunderstood you when you said something mean to me. I must have, you couldn't possibly mean that. He's so cute. He couldn't be a bad person. It's a interesting, we get so tied up in certain things in life, the currencies that seem to matter to us, like looks and money and youth, and some of those are, especially youth, which is, it's something that it slips away, and there's no getting it back. And people can chisel away on their looks, and they can gain and lose money, but youth is there for a certain amount of time, and so we put such a premium on it, and so those things are interesting to me. What attracts us to what and why, and when and how deep the surface of those things are, what's beneath them.
Yeah. It sort of feels like so much of the tension in movies and plays, like In the Company of Men, stems from how many excuses are we going to give this guy? Like how, and playing with that. Yeah, because I did find myself watching that film being being simultaneously horrified by, Chad and the other characters in it, but at the same time kind of like, yeah, there's like a little glow there that's happening.
But he is cute.
Aaron Eckhart,
he is cute. Yeah. There's always that, but he is cute.
But can't we just have him be okay? Yeah. And that's a really interesting thing to sort of like.
And can I, because I like that thing about them, can I change them? And that's something I've looked at as well. Like The Shape of Things was certainly about, kind of stemmed from the idea of again, it's not only women applying this to men, but you seem to hear about it, a number of times, about the idea of like, there's just a couple of things I'd love to change about this guy, and then he'd be perfect, and how we go about doing that. And so that story was just taking that to its natural end, someone who was doing it not because, hey, I'll turn him into a perfect boyfriend, but I'll turn him into a piece of art, So that was part of the nucleus for that idea.
Right. Yeah. So that sort of leads us really very, very naturally to Fat Pig. Where our protagonist, I'm going to just describe the plot of the play for those who aren't familiar with the play, which is Fat Pig tells a story of a man in what we're calling a normative body, a good-looking guy, a sort of average Joe, who falls in love with a fat woman. The play looks at the pressures he feels, whether real or imaginary, to prioritize his own status over his feelings for Helen. His office co-workers are seen to be conspiring to thwart Tom's happiness. And one of Tom's co-workers is his ex-girlfriend, or a girl that he's been sort of casually seeing, whose name is Jeannie. The other co-worker, Carter, is a guy who seems to sort of have a certain kind of Company of Men style power over Tom. In that office workplace. When we came to know each other, Neil and I, through Fat Pig, and you were really quick to agree to giving me access to the text, which is quite amazing. We met in the New York Institution Cafe, French roast, on 85th and Broadway, and we discussed how a libretto was different from a play. I sort of felt like I really wanted to let you know of what you were agreeing to in terms of, it was going to be a lot of text cut, for example, because an opera just does not have as many words as a play does. And in fact, I would be trying to distill it down to its essence, and I was going to try and maintain some sense of your style, of like conversational vernacular and all of these things. But I was also probably going to need to write some new material, and I was a bit tentative about it, I've got to say, as you would be. And your response was simply that I could do what I wanted. And when I asked you if that meant that you trusted me, you said no, but you didn't need to. So, I think that's a pretty great response. But was there any sense that, handing your text over to become an opera was going to completely butcher your work? Was that a fear?
Well, it probably would have been different if you said, I want to write another play based on it, or, I want to write Fat Pig 2, or, something like that. Because it's such a different medium, I found the idea more fascinating, as well as if you'd said, I want to make a musical out of it. I've even thought about, could it be a movie? So I've thought about it in those terms. Could it be a television show? The daily or weekly travails of Tom and Helen. You could probably mine a lot out of it. I don't know how many seasons, but so I've thought about it previous to the conversation we had. And again, because you were talking about a medium that was so different, it felt more fascinating to me. And again, I think that the idea of, trust you. I don't really know you. So, I trust that you're interested. I trust that, you're in the arts and you sound like you're someone who wants to do well by it. So it's always a crapshoot. I've met some really well-meaning people who have done, very average productions of stuff before too.
Right.
And then other people who surprise you and you go, oh, wow, I had no idea that was going to be so good. So you just never really know. And then you do something that you think is really great and other people agree and nobody comes. So it's, you can never quite, you can get it right sometimes, but it's what it is that makes it all work. I don't know. It's alchemy. And yet I don't have a pile of gold sitting over here, so it works every so often. But yeah, I was drawn to the fact that you wanted to do it. And I thought, yeah, I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to write an opera, based on that. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, we're very glad you did.
Me too. Yeah.
Really, really hope, we're going to make a film, so you'll get to see it.
Well, it was a blast even to see, I saw those bits in kind of workshop. It was so fun to see what was going on and how you had started to approach it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's come a long way since then. And, but I think that, the composer, Matt Boehler, had a certain amount of hesitation about, not about the idea of Fat Pig as an opera necessarily, but that he should be the one to write it. But that's been a really interesting process too, whereby.
Why so? Why did he feel that?
Well, I think he felt that as a normative gay man, that was he the guy to write this quintessentially woman's story and music. And he very pretty quickly came around to the idea, and that it could be a collaboration between the two of us, and that that my voice and my perspective as a feminist could somehow be some kind of bridge that we created together.
Right.
I'm not a person that believes anyway that men can't write about women's lives, but
I certainly did, previous to that with the play, and it's funny that sometimes what comes out of that, like you think you're writing one thing, and then suddenly I thought I was writing kind of this thing, and then it takes somebody else that watches the play and they're like, wow, that was an interesting study in cowardice. That to them it was all about Tom, not all about, but it was really Tom's journey, and that it showed what the sort of negative effects of someone who is not courageous. And then somebody else coming up and saying, wow, that to me, was so eye-opening, having lived as a gay man who couldn't unify the two worlds that he was living in. And I
Right.
thought, oh, interesting. I mean, I
Well,
certainly
I think that was potentially the key for Matt as well. Matt Boehler was that, okay, well, we've all been in relationships with someone who was in the closet, or we were in the closet as gay.
that's what, that's essentially what it is. And
It's
you just don't look at it. You just don't look at it necessarily the same way, but
Right.
it's exactly what it is. A guy who's just afraid to make that bridge in his life.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see, I mean, you said something before, which was you thought you were writing a play about something, and if I understood you, that other people came back to you and said it was a play about cowardice or whatever. And
Yeah.
I find that interesting. What did you think you were writing about?
Well, I thought I was writing, a kind of not a romantic comedy, but a relationship piece, that just was kind of stretching again the boundaries of a relationship, of love. What are we willing to do? What are we willing to sacrifice and not sacrifice? And so that's still on the same page of sorts. But I thought it was perhaps a little more evenly distributed. But that person in particular that I mentioned was like, wow, no, really, to me, that was Tom's story. And, I was watching this guy just step by step make worse mistakes. And then when the time came, he picks a terrible moment to try and fuse his two worlds together. He's like, I know, let's go to a beach party. And, so you're like, okay, that's not good. That's probably, you could have done that better.
Right.
But when the moment came, when everybody else was sort of, when the world, as it were, was in quotes, was through staring at him and said, kind of like, give him a pass. Jeannie and Carter stand in for like an entire office, and at that, there's a point where they kind of both go, you know what, just do your thing, whatever, I don't care. And even at that point, he realizes he can't, because there'll be new people. There'll be other people who will judge him, and he isn't strong enough to stand up to that scrutiny. So he comes forward.
That's a really interesting part of the plot to me as well. That sense that you're kind of left wondering: are Jeannie and Carter real? Do they exist? Are they actually saying the terrible things that they're saying? Or is this kind of the classic projection of Tom's weakness?
Right.
Is he kind of just imagining that that's what they would say if they knew, and therefore giving himself an out? Do you see them as? Were you? I have a question as well from another one of our troupe members. That is like, do you write metaphorically for the sake of social commentary, or were you just trying to tell a story?
I think ultimately I was telling a story. For me, it was about. I knew I wasn't going to use an entire office full of people, but they would stand in as the representatives of what the prevailing atmosphere would be like, or at least in Tom's mind. We all kind of have that imaginary audience in our heads, that everybody's watching us and judging us and those things. And usually it's just something we have to get over and go, actually, no one's watching you. People don't care. And they're so worried about their own stuff that they're really not watching you as closely as you think they are. And so that's a great lesson to learn at some point, is that you're not that special, and that you should just go about living your life and not add this other weight onto your shoulders. But for me, yeah, it's not a Strindberg dream play. This is they're representative of the types that he would find himself dealing with in that office atmosphere.
I think there's also a temptation, because of the extremity of the language, to say, oh, well, this is a stylistic choice. And,
Oh, sure. I mean, there is that.
This is absurdism, right? But then, we sat around on the first day of Fat Pig the Opera rehearsal with our star soprano Tracy Cox, and she said to the cast before we started in the workshop, she said, I just want to say something, and that is that this is not absurdism. I hear worse things than this said to me every day of my life. So I sort of.
Yeah, I've certainly heard that from other women who have taken on the role of Helen, and or other people who've said, "Oh, thanks for writing this play." And then you hear just as many, or you see as many comments from people, that how dare you, or why would he write that play, or So you get both sides. You can always find detractors, and then those who will congratulate you, and so it's just like most things. You just kind of have to steer toward the center and say, I'm just going to follow my own. I'll navigate by the stars that are in my own head, and hopefully get it right, because it's like reading reviews. If you believe the good ones, you got to believe the bad ones, because it's a slippery slope to get on that. Oh, that person gets it because they like it. That's not necessarily true. I've had plenty of reviews that were negative that I go, oh yeah, no, I don't think they like it. That's all. That's the only difference, is that they just didn't care for it. And that's okay. That's part of what we do. It's weird that our job is like rated. The world is kind of caught up to theater now. It used to be that we were the only ones who got reviews, like movies and plays and operas, that our work was rated in the newspaper. And now you can write a comment about every meal you've ever had, or any plumber who comes over. So everybody else is starting to get a taste of what it's like to be reviewed.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah. Welcome to our world. Yeah. Not so fun, right? Not so fun. But feels great to have someone like you, and it hurts to have someone not like you. And so if you go by that, it's a tough way to do your business.
Yeah, I sort of think about that a lot, in terms of the work that you write, and the fact that it is controversial, and that people have extreme responses to it. And I'm going to call you a little bit on saying that nobody's watching, and that nobody cares about your career, because clearly people are watching.
Oh yeah. No, that's true. That's
your every step.
That is generalizing. But I just mean in that sense that we, just as a person, even sitting on the subway, it's like, oh, people are looking at me. It's like they're looking at their phone. Look around. They're looking at their phone. They're looking down. They're thinking about where they're going. Not everybody's watching you. It's not as, life isn't quite as full of of pairs of eyes as we sometimes think there are.
Right. Is there some message that you tell yourself, or some kind of protective mechanism that means that you can sort of stay pure in your intention? Or do you, when writing a piece, and being aware that there are going to be these negative voices, you've done it now for a really, really long time, and it seems to have maintained the integrity of its core intention. And I don't know how you do that.
You probably do. Since you do it, you probably know what that feels like. I'm sure it's the same thing. You just have to, as I say before, you just have to guide yourself the best you can forward. And I try and not second guess people. I try and not write for an audience. I try and tell a story, and I hope that people, or enough people, will embrace it. And I don't mean embrace it like, oh, I love it, but that was worth the ride, So that's the thing, is that you want to get to the other end of it and find out what happened. Not that it'll be your favorite thing of all time or any of those things. But the more you try and figure out what people want, or what they're going to buy, or what they're looking for, or what's the next big thing, that you just can spend a lot of time staring at the ceiling, trying to figure that out. So what I don't try and do is second guess myself when I have a story that I want to tell. I don't think about, is it okay for me to tell that story? Is that a story anyone's going to want to see? It's just, if it keeps coming up in my head, I figure I need to tell that story. I'm going to write it down.
what are the dangers in trying to think about an audience? There's a lot of theater these days that is being created to convey a social justice message or to increase representation of a certain underrepresented group, or to coincide with a celebration or whatever.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, I think a lot of that. I think a lot of that is viable. I think my only criteria is that it's good.
Right.
It's all noble and well to do those things, but to do them and not do them very well, it just seems like a waste of resources.
Do you think good art can be created when that is your intention?
Say it again.
Do you think that good art can be the result of a social justice intention?
Sure. In the same way that something can be done badly with that in mind, great intentions and the result is just mediocre. It all I think comes down to execution, and it's not just about this is what we wanted to do, this is what we hope to do. It was all for such a good cause. You can have a good concert and a bad concert, all based on all the money's going to. Doesn't really matter if the music stinks. The money still went to that cause, so that's good, I guess. But it doesn't leave behind something that we'll want to necessarily do. Here's a text that we'll want to keep going back to and putting in front of audiences for years to come. I think there's room for all kinds of stuff. There's room for all kinds of stories. I think we just have to find more venues in which to do it. The good news is that it seems like audiences are more willing to watch stuff on the internet, on their phones, on that the medium has never been more accessible to audiences, and audiences have never been more willing to access things in a variety of ways. So I think that people who, 50, well, is it 50 now for me? Let's say 70 years ago, that the only way that you could get a play done practically was that it was on Broadway. Right. Before regional theater, before off-Broadway, before, so now there's even more of that. I know theaters are closing and having tough times, and there's ups and downs that will always exist. But I think that form is so unique, that form of going, performers in front of a live audience and those being live performers is such a unique experience that it won't ever fade away. It can ebb and flow like anything else. But I just think that that right now it's a great time for people to. It's like, wow, it's hard to gather big audiences together. So I'm going to bring 10 people into my living room and I'm going to tell them a story. That I could have. Yes, you could have told that in a 100-seat theater or maybe a 500-seat theater. But put it in front of an audience. That is what matters really when you want to tell a story. You need someone to communicate with. So I think that there's a lot more chance for people who aren't just looking to get rich or to be famous or whatever, who really are storytellers to tell their stories, to put them out there.
There's obviously a lot of differences in those mediums and the way that media, I guess, and the way that we interact with them as audience members. And it's interesting to me that you've adapted a number of your plays to film. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the process of where do you start? What do you have to take into account in the differences between how you communicate live from how you communicate on film? What's that starting place in
well, yeah, I get sometimes there's no difference. It can be as pure as there's absolutely no difference. Where like an experience for me was I did the play The Shape of Things with a cast. I started it in London. We took it to New York, and then we came to Los Angeles and we made a movie out of it. And the movie and the cast were exactly the same number of scenes. There weren't any, interstitial like, oh, now we'll show a scene of them driving the car to get to another place, or here's some shots of Los Angeles. to make it feel more like a movie. It was just we lifted those scenes and put them in real settings, and then so that became that movie. So that's about as pure a relationship from one medium to the other, the jump, as watching one of these National Theater Lives where you're watching the show that's actually been recorded on the stage. It's not quite that pure theatrical experience, but it's pretty close. So there was no adaptation really at all. I didn't write any new material. I didn't cut. It was all that play put on film. Whereas something else, you find yourself adapting and trying to open it up, or sometimes it has to be longer or shorter, or you put in new material or characters. Film seems to be you show more than you tell, and stage is the inverse, but not always the case. There's some very talky movies and talky plays and quiet plays, and so it just depends on what you tackle and how you want to present it to an audience.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's such a different role for the audience. I mean, there's just such an expectation when you see a play that there is a role for your imagination, right? That you're filling in a certain number of gaps because it's live theater, and but somehow that you interact with it differently when you're watching a film, and it's sort of like, oh, you're expecting to be able to tune out and not have anything expected of you, and
or you don't break that magical fourth wall. That I had a section again in The Shape of Things where in toward the very end of the piece, the audience became an audience for one of the characters, and so she broke the fourth wall and talked to the audience, and that was the toughest translation for me in the film. I was like, how do I do that now in a film where there's a camera lens that's staring at you? Do I pretend it's instead of the audience, or do I going to see the audience and I'm still behind them? So how do I, because there was nothing quite like having, that person break the fourth wall and start looking at audience members and talking to them. That was what made the experience kind of more special. And so I gave a nod to that toward the end of the film where she looked into the camera at one point, but that was, the only way I could kind of make the same experience happen. And it was only for a moment. So that live thing is something that movies can't really capture. It's like every time you go to a movie, you watch one of your favorites and you think, oh, maybe this time the ending will be a little different. No, never. It's always the same. It's just, that's the way it's going to go. You think maybe she'll stay with Bogart and Casablanca, but once again, she gets on the plane and she goes, and that's it, and you hope against hope.
Is there a pattern to the responses you get? A comparative that you've noticed between how people respond to a live play of In the Company of a Man versus the movie? Do you find that the movie affects people more? Obviously, it probably has a much bigger audience, but
Yeah, I haven't had it done on stage enough to really know. I wanted to turn it into a movie or to a musical for a while. I thought that would be a fun experience to turn that movie into a musical and see some of those characters sing, but that never happened. So I've really had mostly just the movie experience, and a lot of people loved it, and a lot of people had a really strong negative reaction to it, and most of them still thought Chad was cute. And that's just the way it goes.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
So you've been writing these stories, these depictions of abhorrent male behavior, some abhorrent female behavior too, since the 90s, and this is incidentally the time period in which we are setting the opera of Fat Pig.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't.
Yeah, we're setting it in 90s Florida, and it was the time before
90s Florida.
Yeah.
Of all places.
Of all places, right? You can imagine that office, right? You can see it.
I can smell that office now.
It was a time before smartphones, before social media became what it is anyway. And since the turn of the millennium, we've seen this sort of black sludge of toxic masculinity come oozing out of the internet. with the constant commentary and the constant threats and rape threats and all of this stuff that we're seeing now. And it is every bit as bad as what you were writing about, and in fact a lot worse. And I wonder if there's any part of you that feels kind of vindicated by that.
Yeah, vindication would be
a strong word. Maybe it's the wrong word.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not necessarily the wrong word. I just think it's not the feeling I would have. But, and it's not even I told you so. It's just kind of like, a raised eyebrow where you go, that's, yeah. I mean,
Nope.
Still there. There we are.
Wow.
I got nothing but a swirly thing there for a second. It's life just always seems to be able to come up with a story that's so much more ghastly and ludicrous and surprising and terrific and romantic, whatever version you want. Life always tends to be able to come up with one that is more spectacular than the ones that we think up as storytellers. It's like I thought up this kind of like crazy scenario for this this play I did that was like a day after 9/11 called The Mercy Seat. And at the time people thought, oh God, out of all the stories you could tell, why would you tell that one? And then that very story started coming out as like, urban myth. And then you would hear about people like, oh, I used that to disappear and get away from my family, or that here were these people who were in there trying to save lives, but they were also, were they actually, looting at the same time some stuff from, below the World Trade Center, all kinds of stories came out of that where you're not vindicated that, oh yeah, you just know that human nature is such that the very best and worst is possible. And so I think as someone trying to tell stories that they haven't heard before, it's your job to try and create these things that an audience goes, okay, great. You're telling me here's another story about a man and a woman falling for each other, but I haven't heard this one.
Right.
It's like telling a joke in a bar. I guess you're looking to tell one that people haven't heard before. So that's sort of the contract you're making, is I'm going to take your time, so I better tell you something you haven't heard.
Yeah. I mean, probably the most recurring criticism of your work is that there's some doubt in one's mind as an audience member whether or not you are condoning the behavior of your cruel protagonists. And I mean, speaking personally, I find that mystifying because to me, in your work, there's no doubt that the bad guys are being portrayed as bad guys. But I mean, a lot of people don't agree with me.
I've heard both. Yeah, certainly.
I wonder if
go ahead.
I wonder if you have any insight into why people feel this way. Like, do they assume that you're basing these characters on your own personal friendships, or
possible? People tend to think that because a lot of writers do grab information and stories from people they know. I tend to not be one of those people. I tend to write from the imagination, but I know lots of people who are very successful in incorporating their own lives or other people's lives into their work. So I think that when people sense, if you're able to imagine those things, they want to somehow believe that then you're capable of those things, and that you must be often I think people want to consider that you're the worst person on the page that you've written down. That must be you, and just because you've had the ability to imagine that person's world.
They don't imagine that you're Helen.
What do you do about that? And I think in terms of, if people haven't been able to read how I feel about those characters, it's because I've left a lot of gray area for them to operate in. They're usually not just black and white, cutouts. And I haven't made it just, a declaration of, oh, this person, or they haven't gotten what what an audience might feel they deserve at the end for what they've done. That kind of thing can leave an audience feeling, because if the more you've wrapped things up, it's easier to put it aside, go home and say, it's done. I mean, a play like this one that you've picked, Fat Pig, is one of the, the ones that I've written that ends in the most abrupt sort of way on the page for the play. And that was very disquieting, I think, for audience members, because it kind of followed a recipe of like, this is what a romantic comedy does. But they didn't run into each other's arms at the end and say, hey, it doesn't matter, I love you, and, everything's going to be okay. It ended like with screeching tires and went, nope, I can't do this. And the audience kind of went, whoa, wait a minute, why are you leaving this in my lap? And so therefore they found that to be less than satisfying. Some did. And then others felt like, wow, life is like that. Sometimes somebody texts you to break up with you.
Right.
And so we don't always have closure. And I think a lot of times people want closure in their art because life is complicated that way. They prefer their TV shows to end, in a certain way, and their movies to end in a certain way, so that they don't have to carry around all that baggage as well.
Yeah, I mean, at least in the opera world, we can play a beautiful play out, as
right.
Helen gets left alone on the beach.
Yeah, well, and with operas, I mean, every other opera, someone's dying or stabbing each other, or so. It's this is just the way it goes. It's just,
we kind of expect a miserable ending. It's true.
Opera's just tragic. So it's like this was a perfect fit for that. You had a built-in operatic ending.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, speaking of endings, let's end this one not too abruptly.
It was such a good segue.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a little awkward, but thank you so much for joining us, Neil. And if anyone is interested in coming and seeing Fat Pig the opera, it opens at the Dickinson Theater at Piedmont, Virginia Community College on the 22nd of January. There are 2 performances. The second one is on the 27th. They start at 8 p.m. and tickets are available from victoryhallopera.org. So, thank you again, Neil. It was a fascinating conversation. I learned a lot about you, and
virtually nothing.
And yet,
at the same time,
I am back where I began, and want to ask
exactly
8 pages of questions that I have.
And I asked not one question about you. That was particularly.
Why don't you ask one now?
Particularly male as well, right? So, oh gosh, yeah. Hey, how are you doing? There you go.
I'm fine.
Yeah, great. And now I'm satisfied. I know you're fine. Oh, you're fine. Oh, great. Okay.
It feels equal to me. Yeah.
Completely. All good.
All right.
Very nice to meet you over the thing again, and I look forward to hearing how everything goes. Good luck. Break a leg and all those. Don't actually, but
thank you so much.
As they say.
Yeah. We'll do our best.
And keep me posted. Thank you.
Will do. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Now.